Council. So we are back again on the fifth day of Taiping Bird Week 2021. Thank you for staying with us. And yesterday, viewers were taken on a visit to the Zoo Taiping and Night Safari with the All About Birds of Taiping Zoo and Night Safari session together with me and Mr. Apong from NES. For today, we are bringing viewers special individuals with extensive experience that will provide knowledge related to animal conservation efforts. With us today is a familiar name that is the backbone of the management of Taiping Zoo and Night Safari, namely Dr. Kevin Lazarus, the director of Taiping Zoo and Night Safari. He will provide live sharing infos on the role of zoos in conservation. As we all know, Taiping Zoo and Night Safari bears the responsibility in ensuring the five functions of the zoo are given attention and implemented in accordance with current rules. The five functions are conservation, education, training, research, and recreation. These five functions were able to bring Taiping Zoo and Night Safari to a higher zoo level in Malaysia and even the world. Later, Dr. Kevin will explain in more detail on this matter. In addition to this session, a video session related to hornbill conservation efforts in Merapoh Pahang, which will be shared by Mr. Izrin Mukri from Malayan Rainforest Station, will follow after Dr. Kevin's slot. And we do also have a slot from Perhilitan, which is the Department of Wildlife and National Parks. And they will explain more on the role of Perhilitan, conservation of milky stocks, Malayan gore, and also the Malayan sun bears. So I'm very sure that the audience actually can't really wait to watch all these videos today. And after all the glitch and the technical difficulties, my apologies. But before that, while giving the panels a few minutes to get prepared, we would like to announce that Taiping Zoo and Night Safari will be reopened to public starting October 18, 2021. So you guys can refer to the ZTNS or Zoo Taiping's official Facebook and for more information on operating hours and SOPs for visiting the zoo. To all viewers, don't forget to click the like and share button for today's sharing session. You can watch this live session through four platforms, namely the Taiping Bird Week 2021, Facilitating Taiping, Taiping Zoo and Safari, and Taiping Municipal Council. For those who has questions, please drop us your question in the comment sections below. So without further delay, let's start the session with a teaser video of today's program. Enjoy.
Kita tak boleh berterusan merosakkan semua sumber-sumber semula jari yang ada.
Like to share what we are doing in the Hornbill Conservation Project.
Selamat datang ke Taiping Bird Week 2021.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ridwan, for the introduction. A very good morning to all our viewers and to all who are participating in Taiping Bird Week. Today, I'll be giving a presentation on the role of zoos in conservation. So my presentation will include a little bit about history of zoos, what is conservation, and also on details about what we are doing for conservation in Taiping. Since I'm from Zoo Taiping, so I will highlight what Zoo Taiping is doing for conservation. Can I have the first slide, please? All right, this is the title of the presentation, The Role of Zoos in Conservation of Wildlife. Next. Okay, so what is a zoo? So there are definitions for zoos, and the following definitions are there. Please, the next slide. Next, okay. Zoo are also called zoological gardens or zoological park. It's a place where wild animals and, in some instances, domesticated animals are exhibited in captivity. MASPA, the Malaysian Association of Zoological Parks and Aquaria, defines zoological parks and aquaria as inclusive of zoos, zoological gardens, biological parks, safari parks, public aquaria, bird parks, reptile parks, insectaria, and other collections of wildlife, primarily for public exhibition and or breeding of endangered species. So basically, any park or any institution that holds any type of wildlife, irrespective of whether it's a mammal, insect, or birds, by definition is called a zoo. Next. So a little brief history of zoos. Next. Okay, way back in 4,500 BC, before Christ, that means about 7,000 years ago, pigeons were already domesticated in Iraq. In those days, Iraq used to be called Baghdad as well. So it was many thousands of years ago that animals had already been domesticated. In 2,500 BC, many animals were depicted wearing collars in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Elephants were domesticated in India 5,000 years ago. In 1000 BC, the Chinese Emperor Wen Wang founded the Garden of Intelligence, which was a very large park, 1,500 acres in size, where he was actually keeping animals in captivity. So in history itself, way back in history, there are a lot of civilizations that actually already started keeping animals in captivity, wild animals were domesticated or being kept in captivity. The photograph on the right actually shows the war elephant. Those days, during wars, elephants were trained to be war elephants, and in this photograph, actually, it shows not a misbehaving zoo visitor being punished, but showing the use of the war elephant in executing war prisoners. And so they use the elephant to execute prisoners. So this is historical. But what I'm trying to say is that animals were already kept in captivity and used for various purposes way back in history. Next. So in 60 BC, Romans kept wild animals for spectacle fights. If you can remember a little bit on history, there's the story of feeding the Christians to the lions. So the Romans, those Christians which were against the beliefs of the Romans, kept wild lions in captivity in arenas and actually pushed these people into the arena, and they had to fight these lions, and of course they usually died. In the 13th century, Marco Polo visited the zoo of Kublai Khan in Asia, which is something very interesting because Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan, if you know, were actually nomads, but they somehow managed to keep kept in animals in captivity, and in fact they domesticated the wild horses to be used for their own uses in those days. In 1333, King Philip VI has a large and famous menagerie in Paris, in France, and so forth. So even the Mexican Aztecs actually kept wild animals in captivity way back in 1519. Next. So for the history of the modern zoo. Next. In 1752, the Imperial Menagerie at the Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna founded the zoo, and it's actually still open till now. So that is the world's oldest existing zoo in Vienna, the Schönbrunn Palace. In 1775, the Royal Zoological Park in Madrid, Spain was founded. In 1793, the zoological collection of the Jardin des Plantes in Paris was started. The London Zoo was started by the Zoological Society of London in 1828 in Regent's Park. And the oldest zoo in the US, that's the Philadelphia Zoo, was founded in 1859. And then I'll jump to Malaysia because we are from Taiping. I'm talking about Taiping Zoo. It's the first public zoo that was established in Malaysia in 1961. And of course, the oldest Wild animal collection in Malaysia was the collection belonging to the Sultan of Johor, which was established in the 1930s. But as a public zoo, the Taiping Zoo is the first one to be established. So currently, there are over 1,000 establishments that have made public viewing of animals around the world. Next. Okay, so for the history, continue with the history of modern zoos. Zoos now focus heavily on education and conservation. Initially, zoos were started as, of course, places for education and research, but also as places where you have entertainment for recreation. But now the emphasis is more for education and conservation. So much attention is given to the needs of the animals, and animals are shown in simulations of the natural environment, and information about the ecology, behavior, and status is displayed. So modern zoos employ biologists and wildlife veterinarians to care for and study the animals. So basically what we're saying is zoos now have transited from just being a place where you just display animals for entertainment to places for conservation and education. Next. So there are 5 main objectives of why zoos exist. In the beginning, in the early days, it was mainly for recreation, as I said, but now we have these 5 pillars or objectives for zoos, which is basically conservation, education, research, training, and recreation. Next. Next, please. So for this presentation, I'm going to go into conservation more rather than the other 4 objectives, because this is what we are emphasizing today. So what is conservation? Conservation is, as defined by WAZA. WAZA is the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Is securing populations of species in natural habitats for the long term. What this means is conservation is we make sure that a species is maintained in the natural habitat, not in a zoo, not in an ex situ environment, but in the natural habitat for a long term. That means zoos play an important role in ensuring that species are conserved in the nature, in the wild, in the natural habitats. So that is what conservation is. Next. So conservation in zoos can be divided into 4 main components. Basically, the first one is conservation breeding. The second is conservation education. The third is contribution to conservation. And the fourth is assurance populations. Let me explain a little bit. Conservation breeding basically means breeding is done in a captive environment, could be in a zoo or in a park, but for the sole purpose of reintroduction back to the wild. So if you are doing breeding just to maintain the species in captivity for long term, not for reintroduction, that is not conservation breeding, that is preservation or population management. So if a zoo wants to do conservation breeding, that breeding is for the eventual intention to release that species back to the wild where it is required. There is either some localized extinction, or the numbers have reduced to a certain number that they are not viable anymore, that they need to have new introductions of individuals into that population. So that is conservation breeding. Conservation education is when you educate your visitors about conservation. So this is something that is quite easy for zoos to do. When you talk about conservation, when you talk about what are the efforts that are done for conservation, how to help reduce wildlife trade, wildlife crime, stop trading in animals, stop keeping wildlife as pets, and so on. This is all messages which can be part of conservation education. The third is contribution to conservation. This is where zoos can participate in conservation in the nature by contributing either in terms of dollars or in terms of staff support, equipment, etc. There's so many ways that you can contribute towards conservation efforts in the nature. Maybe boots on the ground, helping with preventing of poaching and etc., or giving financial resources to help a particular organization conserve species in nature. So that is contribution to conservation. And the fourth one, which is assurance populations, This is where a particular species is facing endangerment, some kind of threat to its survival in the wild. And temporarily, this particular species is brought into an animal collection or into a zoo and is maintained, maybe even bred, until that threat to that species is diminished, and then it is reintroduced back to the wild. Those are called assurance populations. One very good example was a particular island where there was a particular species of pigeon found on that island, and that whole island was undergoing this forest fire phenomena. So there was a lot of fires going on, and these pigeons were at risk of becoming extinct. So many of these birds which were doing well were caught, saved from that forest fires, brought into a zoo, and once that forest fire was put under control and the plants regenerated, those birds were put back into the wild. So that is assurance populations, and many zoos have a lot of experience and knowledge and know-how how to maintain species, so they can contribute very much when such a situation arises to help in assurance population management. Thank you. Next. So I'll now go into conservation programs at Zoo Taiping and Night Safari. So some of the efforts that we're doing, just to highlight that things are possible and things can be done. Next. First, I would like to start off with the flora and fauna conservation efforts, but basically I'm starting off with the flora. So in Zoo Taiping and Night Safari, currently there are an estimated 100 species of plants, including trees and shrubs, and of which more than 60 species actually have been planted in the zoo since 1987. So we've been planting forest trees, trees that provide fruits for birds to feed on, trees that provide act as food plants for certain insects, and so on. So we have also been planting plants and trees that are actually attractive to insects such as butterflies. So if you are aware, or if you're not aware, butterflies actually have food plants for the caterpillars. So certain species of butterflies feed on certain species of plants. So their caterpillars only feed on a particular species. For example, the common monarch and the lime butterfly, they only feed on citrus plants, lime plants. So if you plant that kind of plants in your garden, then you'll get the common monarch and the lime butterflies actually coming to your house. Of course, if you have plants planted lime for utilizing the leaf, they'll start eating the leaves, but plant a bit extra. Then you have these butterflies flying around. And then for the adults, they feed on nectar from the flowers. So if you have that as well, then you have a small ecosystem going where you have butterflies coming to your garden and so forth. So we are doing the same at the zoo. We've identified a certain number of food plants for the caterpillars. We are planting that so that we get more butterflies coming to the zoo. Plants are also a source of food for birds and also function as roosting areas for them. So that too, when we add on more and more different species of plants, you create a different diversity, and therefore you attract different species of birds to come to the zoo. So as a bonus, as an additional advantage, many of these plants also can serve as fodder or food for hoofstock that live in the zoo, our own animals. So when we do pruning, we can use this as additional food for these animals, as enrichment, etc. So there's additional food source from wild plants that we have planted at the zoo. So this serves as something special for the animals that we have. So the plants at the zoo are not only an attraction for the birds and insects, but they're also part of the landscape and beautify the zoo's environment. And with all these additional plants, we create a rainforest feel. So we feel like as if we are in the rainforest when we come to the zoo. So that is part of the intention of why we're also having a lot of plants. And also eventually, these plants that we have are identified, and also for plant enthusiasts, those who love botany, and they just want to see plants easily, forest trees easily, you can come to the zoo as well, and you can look at all these trees and enjoy the beauty of the trees. When they flower, when they fruit, etc., you can see the differences in the plants in the zoo. Next. So these are some photographs of some of the trees at the zoo. For example, the greater rough laurel, bintang golau, etc. Sentul, which is a big fruit tree as well. Belinjau. Next. Okay, some other pictures of some of the plants. Merawan siput jantan is, I think actually quite commonly planted along roadsides now. Saga, the red seed tree, halban, etc. Next. So Ficus benjamina, or the weeping fig, actually is a very good tree because it attracts a lot of birds during the fruiting season. So you get lots of species of birds coming to feed on the fruits. Common tembusu, nibung. Nibung is a palm. It's a giant palm with a very thorny trunk. But during fruiting seasons, the fruits actually attract certain species of birds, green pigeons, as well as the hornbills. So, and this tree is actually perennial. You have fruits throughout the year on different trees, so you get birds coming to feed on them regularly. The Japanese cherry, this is a very interesting looking Japanese cherry. And also, we have other species like the banyan and the hibiscus. Next. So we have very tall trees, we have fruit trees, we have food plants for other insects, for butterflies, and the tall trees actually also roosting areas for bird species. And some of the very tall trees in the zoo actually are breeding sites for our milky stocks, which I'll talk about a bit later. We also have a tualang in the zoo, which is a very huge and interesting tree to look at. And this is a huge tree we have inside the zoo, Cumpasia excels. Tualang and some in the forest sometimes is famous because honeybees tend to make their nest in tualang trees and they call it the tualang honey. So that is a bit famous. Next. So this is a list of some of the plants that we have planted at the zoo. We have planted about 58 or 60 species at the zoo. Next. Okay, next. Okay, now I'd like to talk about the Malayan tiger. MASPA, which is the Malaysian Association of Zoological Parks and Aquaria, works closely with the Department of Wildlife and National Parks. And we have on various programs, and one particular one is the collaboration for the conservation of the Malayan tiger, where all zoos holding Malayan tigers in Malaysia will collectively manage this population. And we work together with all other MASPA members, those who have tigers in their collection, to increase the population of species, of individuals rather, within the zoo collection. So, as we all may know, that the tiger in the wild is facing a lot of threats from poaching and habitat loss. And zoos are not a replacement for the tigers in the wild. It's just a supplement. It's a complementing the efforts in the wild. So the wild efforts to conserve tigers in the wild is very, very critical to the survival of the species. But as a backup to the wild population, as a genetic backup, we need to have tigers in captivity in proper environments and proper conditions so that we do not face a situation where we completely lose the tiger. Next. The next is the black-crowned night heron, which we started work way back in the 90s, where we initially released about 100 birds. And although this is a common bird previously at the zoo, because we were very successful in breeding the night heron, we have managed to establish a viable population within the zoo grounds and the surrounding areas, and which now they have spread far and wide. So it's very common to see black-crowned night herons in Taiping all over the place. So it's, of course, where there's water and there's food, fish basically. And so it's one species that we have managed to establish here. Next. So this is the free-ranging population of black-crowned night herons. And you can see some of them actually nesting within the zoo grounds. So it's quite a common sight within the zoo and even in the lake gardens and surrounding areas around Taiping where there's streams, rivers, and even like ponds and lakes. And many people are actually quite surprised when they come to the zoo to see so many of these birds just flying around, minding their own business. And during the breeding season, many trees are full of their nests. So it's very interesting to see the young ones being raised by the parents. Next. The third one I'd like to talk about is the rhinoceros hornbill. We successfully actually released a pair of rhinoceros hornbills in 2005. And this pair actually have established themselves very well. And they breed regularly every year. And every year, you can actually see the offspring come to the zoo. They bring the offspring once they fledge from the nest hole. They'll bring them to the zoo because there's a lot of fruit trees for their feeding. And eventually, once the young ones mature, they will fledge. They will disperse into the nearby forests of Bukit Larut. So this goes on every year. And this a very interesting story for the rhinoceros hornbill was about 5 years after the first release, the pair used to breed regularly and bring the offspring to the zoo. But one year, the male was vandalized by somebody, I think. I mean, somebody must have hit him with the sticks and stones, and he was very badly injured. The wings were broken, but he was alive. Somebody found him at the roadside and brought him to the zoo. But in spite of all our efforts, we didn't manage to save him, and he died. So we were thinking that that will be the end of our pair of hornbills coming to the zoo with their chicks every year. But to our surprise, the female hornbill actually paired up with another male, a wild male, and then started coming back to the zoo. And that so they continue this tradition until now. So even until now, every year, once they breed their offspring, they will bring it to the zoo, bring them if there's more than one, and then disperse and so on. But they still maintain that pair still maintains coming and utilizing this area as their territory. Next. So here you can see the hornbills. The top left is a male. The top center is a female. The difference is the color of the eye, the iris around the eye. You can see if the male is red and the female is white. And the top right is the young one on the right hand side, and the bottom left and center is the young hornbill. You can see that the casque, like the horn-like structure, is not developed yet. And on the right is the flying hornbill, which is an adult. You can see the casque, like the horn structure, is well developed. Next. Okay, the fourth conservation project that we are doing is the milky stalk. Mycteria cinerea is in Malaysia. It's naturally occurring in the mangroves of Kuala Gula. The numbers started plummeting in the late 90s, and it became almost extinct in the wild. Fortunately, Zoo Negara had a breeding program with these birds, and also we managed to get 2 birds from Jurong Bird Park in Singapore. So Zoo Negara sent 10 birds to us in 2009, and from Jurong we had 2. And so with these 12 birds, we started breeding them in captivity, and the numbers actually we managed to build up. And in 2016, we started a release program with the aim of creating an independent, free-flying population in the zoo and eventually the surrounding areas. So we have been very successful in this, and currently we have within our exhibit we have about 50 over birds, and the free-flying population is now about 35. And this year was a very successful year. We have many nests both in the exhibit at the zoo and in the free-flying population. So many chicks are fledging. So even now, I think there's still some fledging. So in a couple of months, we will actually know what is the net number, how many we have produced. So it's very, very interesting to see these birds because they fly in and out of the zoo. You can see them in the lake gardens. And for many birders, it's a lifer to see milky stalks. So to be able to see them flying around freely here is something quite impressive. Next. So this is showing some pictures nesting in the aviary. The one on the left shows the pair in breeding color. You can see the head of the male very dark purplish color. And another sign of nesting is you can see that the legs are stained whitish. That is from the fecal matter. It's stained whitish. Next. These are the free flying populations. So you can see nesting on the tall trees within the zoo on the left. In the center on the top is some of the parents with the fledged chicks. The fledged chicks, usually the color is more grayish, brownish, rather than white and black as in the parents. The center bottom, you can see the parent with 2 chicks in the nest. And the free flying flock in the zoo. Next. So this year we have a total of 11 nests in the exhibit with more than 7 chicks already visible. And in the free flying population, we have around 7 nests. And I think around that number of chicks actually have fledged as well. Next. Okay, this is actually a video. I'm not sure whether we can play. Can you try and play the video? Yeah, okay. This is actually from a handheld, not camera, but my handphone, to show the milky stalks using the thermals to fly, to soar in the sky. So this is actually right at the zoo. They're soaring very high up in the sky. Sometimes until there's just a tiny speck in the sky, and then they will come back down again and back to the zoo or go feeding outside as well. Next. The fifth conservation breeding program is for the red dole, Coon alpinus. I think this is a species that many people don't even know that we have in Malaysia. The original name for the red dole, the local name is Rigala. So many people think Rigala is the wolf, but initially the Rigala is actually the red dole in Malaysia. So our intention is to build up a good captive population. We also must ensure there's adequate genetic viability, and then establish populations in other zoos, those who have the facilities and are interested, and eventually to do some reintroductions in viable habitats of known historical range. Current population is 16, so we hope to build up the numbers a little bit more, and then we will work with the wildlife department and identify forests which are viable for some reintroduction. Next. Because this is at the exhibit in the zoo. You can see it's actually a very large exhibit, semi-forest kind of environment, and the red doles are doing extremely well. Then they actually build their own nest under the clump of nibong trees, and you can see that they are very, very intelligent. They have their own engineering system, how to dig their nest and make sure water doesn't go in. So they are, of course, surviving in the wild. So that's how they manage themselves. Next. The sixth project is an ongoing project for the Malayan Serau. This is with a project with the Department of Wildlife and National Parks to rescue and establish a captive breeding program for Serau. So we have various capture methods, and the successful method so far is with the soft rope snare only for young animal and coral traps for adults. So we are also developing safe methodology for chemical immobilization and recovery, and use of long-acting tranquilizers to bring these animals into captivity and try to create a good captive environment for them and to start a good breeding program for them. This too, eventually, if we manage to start breeding them in adequate numbers, then eventually for reintroduction as well. Next. So this is showing some photographs where we are building a coral trap at a rescue site. Basically, this animal that we are bringing in is from conflict areas where they are actually considered doomed animals. The whole surrounding of this small patch of forest actually developed with housing or highways or shopping malls coming up. And so they are basically trapped there. And if we don't rescue them, they might be poached or they might get hit by car and die eventually because that forest is very small. So this is a rescue program with Perilitan. Next. So this is in our rescue sites and in our coral traps, we actually have camera traps, and we actually can see real time what happens there. So we can see the animals going in and out. We haven't triggered the traps yet, just to see how the animals are moving in and out of the trap site area. Next. Okay, so there's one animal we managed to rescue, and she's with us now. Her name is Uni, and this is the team from Zoo Taiping and also the wildlife department. This particular animal, I think, went into the trap late in the afternoon. So by the time we got to her was, I think, almost midnight, and tracking up the hill, and then drafting her, and then loading up and coming back. I think we reached Taiping the next morning. So, but this one was a very successful project. Next. The seventh one is, I would like to talk a little bit of the Eurasian hoopoe. It's not an endangered species, but Taiping was kind of blessed, I would say, to suddenly have a pair of hoopoe turn up this year and start breeding within the Taiping Lake Gardens. Next. So it's least concern in the IUCN red data list, but for us it's very rare in Malaysia. They are found more in mainland Asia and towards Africa, but in Malaysia it's very rare. So rarely seen, spotted once in a while. But to observe nesting and have successful chicks flash probably is the first time in Malaysia. We're not sure, but there are no written reports. So in Taiping, we were very fortunate. We had them nest not once but twice in the same nest hole in the Taiping Lake Gardens, and both times 3 chicks flashed. Next. So this is the story. They started nesting. We observed them nesting on the 5th of April in a yellow flame tree, in a nest hole in a yellow flame tree. And the pair managed to raise 3 chicks during a 2-month period from April to May. And the chicks flashed on the 14th, 15th, and 17th of May, the 3 chicks. And then again, they nested again. And 3 more chicks were raised, which flashed on July 2nd, 4th, and 4th. So 3 chicks. So total of 6 chicks flashed. Total duration, the chicks were in the nest, we estimate about 20 days. So a lot of study was done and data was collected. Next. So this is the nest hole in a yellow flame tree. Next. Oh yeah, so this is a video. So this is a parent feeding the chick. All right, that is a short video. Okay, next. So even because it was in a public area, it was very easy to observe them. So we got pictures of them mating, feeding the chicks, feeding the female. When she first got into the nest, the male was feeding the female as well before they have chicks. So it's very interesting to note. It's a bit like the hornbill, but of course the hornbill, the female is sealed in the nest. This one, the female is not sealed, but the male comes and feeds her, but once in a while she goes out as well. Next. So feeding of the chicks. So we managed to observe on what are the different types of food that the parents were bringing to the chicks. Next. So these are the chicks from the first nesting. You can see the chicks in the nest hole. The parents are feeding them. Next. Once they are fledged, the parents, of course, continue to feed them and show them how to look for food. So this nesting site that they selected actually is a very good one because it is beside a stream and there are big fields nearby, and of course it's in the lake garden. So to get food in the grasses, in the fields and all is very easy for them. So very easy to find food. So probably one of the reasons why they started nesting here. Of course, on the top right, you can see a common this magpie robin is just looking at what's going on there. Next. So these are again the birds in the nest hole, and then the chicks in the field, where the parents still actually hunt for food for them. A lot of insects there, and also feeding them, and eventually they learn how to feed on their own. Next. So these are a list of some of the food items being fed to the chicks. Actually, a lot of food items from caterpillars to fish, crickets, ground cockroaches is very commonly taken for the chicks, etc. Next. So data was collected on the nest, nesting site, depth of the nest hole, etc. Next. So observation was day and night, and in fact, because this was in a public area, we of course cordoned off the area, and the zoo staff actually was there 24 hours a day to make sure nobody harasses the birds or try to steal them or the chicks or whatever. And we also had support from the local birding community and also from the NGO Nest, who sent their team for all the photography, etc. So a lot of work was done on this. Next. So, and also it of course attracted a lot of media attention. You can see the photograph on the left with the council president, Tuan Tuan Khairul Amir, the council secretary, myself is there, the team from NES. You can see how they try to take photographs, lying down on the ground, trying to camouflage themselves, etc. So, but since this was right in the Lake Gardens, it was very interesting and it's very easy to observe. So it's something to create a lot of awareness about birding and bird observations and conservation. Next. Okay, so this is all in the media, the stories that came out. So it attracted a lot of attention and a lot of media coverage. Next. So future planning, we are also planning to do the captive breeding and reintroduction of the green peafowl. For those who are aware and those who are not aware, the green peafowl is found in Southeast Asia and was at one time found in our forest in Peninsular Malaysia as well. But unfortunately, the green peafowl in Peninsular Malaysia had become extinct. They are still found in Indochina, Thailand, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, uh, and in Java, but not in Peninsular Malaysia. And the subspecies which is most similar to us apparently is the one from Java, from some museum specimen which is in Singapore, which was the DNA was analyzed. And so we presume that the closest subspecies is the Javanese, which is Pavo muticus muticus. And so, of course, in private collections and in private breeders, they do have some of these. And so we have started bringing back a pair. Now we have a male and two females of Pavo muticus muticus. And this year we are getting three pairs from a private breeder in Thailand who happen to have the same subspecies. We worked out on some exchange program. And once we get the species here, we will try to do captive breeding. And then eventually we want to do some reintroduction with Perilitan, and a good site for us, I think, will be Bukit Larut. Because the topography is fantastic. Of course, there are a lot of predators there, so the method of reintroduction is very important. We have to really do research and study this. But I went to one location in North Thailand, in Chiang Rai, where they have a similar breeding, rather a conservation project for green peafowl in Chiang Rai, and the topography is almost exactly like in Bukit Larut. The forest is nearby. There's open patches like in Bukit Larut, and the wild birds actually come twice a day to these areas because there's a little bit of token feeding done for them, and then they go back to the forest. So it's a very big tourist attraction, other than, of course, doing conservation work. So this is, I think, something that we can really look into for future, bringing back a species that is extinct in Malaysia. And of course, Wildlife Department is also doing some work, but this is to complement what they are doing. Next. Okay, I would like to quickly, I think my time is a bit getting on, but I'd like to quickly run through two efforts that we are doing. Bird conservation site in Kampung Boyan, where we have identified two locations. The first one is where the migratory blue-tail bee-eaters use for resting as well as for some feeding. We have identified this location, which is right in the middle of Kampung Tersuzun, the housing scheme. And together with the council, we have managed to maintain this area as an open site for the conservation of these birds. Next. So this is the first conservation site, which is the blue-tailed bee-eaters. You can see in the layout plan, the one marked red. That is the site we are conserving, and of course, it's surrounded by housing. But this small area, which is about 2.5 acres, is good enough to maintain quite a number of species for the long term. Next. So this is the location of the photograph of the location. Next. It's like a wetlands a little bit, and we are of course working together with the relevant agencies, the Wildlife Department, even UPM is helping us, the state government, and NEST, the NGO. This is a signage up at that site. Next. So in this side, you can even see like the Baya Weaver or having nests. You can see the house just beside that. But it's always small. It's a very critical area for this bee eaters, because during the migratory period, this is one of the locations they utilize. So if these locations keep on disappearing. Eventually, they won't come here anymore because there's no place for them. So if we manage to conserve some of these sites, then it's a good place, and they can keep coming here. Next. So this is a list of some of the birds. Once we started studying that site, then we realized that actually there are a lot of species that are actually utilizing that site, and some of them are actually quite rare birds. Next. So actually more than 30 species at the moment. I'm sure once you start conserving the site and there's less disturbances, the number of species will start increasing. Next. So some of the birds that are utilizing the area, we were surprised to find the oriental prenticole coming there, the greater painted snipe, which was actually a surprise for us as well, and also like red wattle lapwing, common sandpipers, and of course, the reason we started this site was for the blue-tailed bee-eaters on the top. Next. These are more common birds, but any species that we help conserve is critical for us. Next. Okay, you even get Brahminikites, scaly, slaty-breasted rail, Asian brown flycatcher. Some of these birds are actually quite rare as well, not easily seen. So if you can come to this area, sometimes you can see them. Next. Okay, so these are more species. Next. Okay, then we have a second site, actually quite close to this area, which actually was a state land reserve for India Water Consortium to build their water treatment plant. It's a centralized water treatment plant for Taiping, and for this whole area is about 48 acres, about 50 acres, and one of a friend of mine actually reported to me that he saw a lot of birds roosting there in one particular section of this whole project area, and he was concerned because he said he thinks they are nesting, and if it's possible, maybe we can look into it and see whether we can help conserve. So we actually visited the site, and we found that actually this was a heronry where the cattle egrets actually has started nesting, and this particular area is about 5 acres, less than 5 acres, which is a wetland kind of environment, swampy. And then we realized that there are more species that are actually utilizing this area. Now we are working together with the council, with IWK and Jabatan Pembentungan Malaysia, Perkhidmatan Pembentungan, to actually try to conserve this site so that this place can be a heronry for future generations to see them. Next. So this is the site. Okay, next. So it's surrounded by the. So this is a video of the conservation site. Maybe a quick run at the video. So once we told the consultant for the project that this area seems to be critical for these birds, they also got interested. They sent their drone up to actually take a video of this location. So fortunately for us, this particular site is not part of the area to be developed. It's supposed to be maintained as a grassland. So we are asking them to actually maintain this as a wetland so that the species here can continue utilizing this area. Maybe just put up a fence to prevent any encroachment and maintain it as it is. And we are very positive that they are quite supportive of this idea, and we are following up with them. And we hope to be able to conserve this particular area. It's actually very interesting. When we started looking into it, there are more species that are of concern. Okay, next. So you can see actually the nesting sites of the birds. Next. So this is a second conservation site for egrets and herons. You can see purple herons, cattle egrets, little herons, night herons, all kind of birds coming there. Even we have open bill stock actually roosting there at night. Next. This is a video. No. Next. Oh, it's a video. This during a breeding season last year, I think. See, the tree was full of nests for cattle egrets. Actually, if you go in the daytime, you see a lot of nests. But if you go in the evening, you see a lot of birds because the parents come back to roost as well. So you can see lots and lots of birds in this area. All right, next. We just run through this one. Okay. So some of the birds that utilize the area, the open-bill stork, little egrets, yellow bittern, little herons, purple herons, cattle egrets, the biggest number. Next. Okay, this is quickly to go through. I think Dr. Ridwan already did the presentation yesterday about birds found in Zoo Taiping. So I think I'll just run through this. So even the stock, open-bill stock comes here sometimes. And a lot of other species. The common kingfisher, name is common kingfisher, but it's not that common, and we get to see that here as well. Next. Malayan night heron was quite not so common. Pied hornbill and the white drum shama. Actually, now we have a small group here that are breeding within the zoo area. Next. Some birds seen in the Taiping Lake Gardens. I think Dr. Ridwan represented. The brown wood owl had some chicks this year, and they were very, very visible. Next. The long-tailed parakeet, which is now quite an iconic species for Taiping Lake Gardens. The pigeons, there are a few species, red-throated barbet, rhinoceros hornbill, also another iconic species easily seen here. Next. This is a short video on a banded bay cuckoo raised by a common iora. So cuckoos are basically parasitic birds in the sense that the parents actually lay their eggs in a nest of other species, and that species will actually raise the banded bay cuckoo's young as if it's their own. So here's a short video actually on a common iora feeding a banded bay cuckoo that was raised, that it raised without knowing that it's not its own. Is it a video? Can you play the video? It's a quick video. Ah, yes. So you see the small common iora feeding the banded bay cuckoo, such a big bird there. Yeah. But because they're parasitic, they lay their eggs in the nest. The foster parents don't know that it's not their own. Okay, next. Okay, then we also have created a conservation fund. And this fund is actually to finance conservation programs. So this can be used for the following purposes: to finance local and international conservation programs, to finance costs such as project sites, purchase of equipment, medical supplies, and other related expenditures, finance traveling, etc. So one of it is contribution to conservation. Earlier when I mentioned 4 types of conservation that zoos can do. So the fourth one is one of them is contribution to conservation, and this is one of the reasons why we have created this conservation fund, so that we too can help in contributing to conservation. Next. All right, with that, I end my presentation. Thank you, and I hand over to Dr. Ridwan as moderator. Thank you very much.
All right. I would like to thank Dr. Kevin for the very informative and wonderful presentation regarding conservation. Maybe viewers that are actually into conservation and they wanted to actually understand what the conservation means and what really the function of zoos, that presentation was really a total wrap up. All right. Okay. We will get ready for the next session. There will be a video sharing regarding hornbill conservations in Merapu Pahang by Mr. Izrin Mukri by the Malayan Rainforest Station. So we'll continue after this.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Izrin from the Malayan Rainforest Station, MRS. So we are now again in Hornbill Valley, our most sacred places in Merapu for now. And today I would like to share what we are doing in the Hornbill Conservation Project in general, and also about the studies that we are going to do and what we've done so far before. So first of all, I would like to share with you why do we think it's important to conserve hornbill in Peninsular Malaysia, globally, as well as specifically why Merapu and why do we choose to conserve hornbills here? Why do we choose to focus on conservation of hornbill in Merapu Forest Complex? So hornbill has been known to be the farmers of the forest. Their importance to the ecosystem can't be compared. So they eat a lot of fruits, and they also disperse the seeds far from the parent trees. So there are a lot of other animals that actually eat fruits and disperse seeds, but hornbills, their ecological characteristic, their gut behavior, they can actually bring the seeds further from the parent trees. So this means once they eat seeds or fruits from the parent tree, they can germinate it far from the parent tree, outside of the forest. So we could get fruiting trees in a further area compared to other animals, which they might just germinate the seeds nearby the parent tree. So they are quite important. They are very important. Hornbills are very important in the ecosystem, being one of the animals that can disperse seeds further from the parent trees. So that's one thing. However, hornbills globally are threatened. Most of the hornbills are threatened. In Peninsular Malaysia, we have 10 species of hornbills, and 9 of them are actually threatened to extinction. The only one that is not threatened is the Oriental pied hornbill. So basically, this place we've noticed it. We've been here for the past 3 years, and it's actually agroforested landscape. It's actually an oil palm plantation with some banana trees and pokok getah, rubber trees, and also actually it is sandwiched by a forested landscape, which includes a limestone area. So on our far right here, we have limestone, big limestone area, a lot of different things. And with that, we also have a lot of hornbills and also birds. So this area is also a nesting area of a rhinoceros hornbill. So this place was shown to us back in 2018 by the local orang asli Batik on the presence of a nest, which they actually realized earlier before, like 5-10 years before this. So they didn't chop down the tree, they just left it, and then it is actually being still utilized by rhinoceros hornbill every year. So back then, when we noticed the nest, we deployed some of our men to scout the area and to look if it's possible, if it's feasible for us to conduct a long-term research, long-term monitoring of hornbill in this landscape. And the first year was very challenging because the hornbills, as we know, they are intelligent, they are very skittish. Some of them are skittish, so they don't show themselves, or even though they are around, but they don't go to their nest when we are here. So what did we do after that is we place camera traps. Instead of our physical appearance, physical presence in the area, we place camera trap and leave it. So after a while, we collected the camera trap and we found out that the male and the female of the hornbill actually do feed the chick, which is inside the cavity. So we know it is an active nesting, but because of its very shy, skittish behavior, we didn't go through with being present at the site. The following year, which is last year, we then try to be present to see again, to assess again if there is a possibility for human presence in the area. And it was good to us. It was our luck was on our side, where the hornbill don't care very much about our presence. But given that we are from a safe distance, like where I'm sitting now, the nesting is just behind me, so this is not a safe distance. So we actually sat quite far from here in our secret clubhouse, where we observe hornbills from there, and they actually don't mind. Sometimes they do go very low to the ground to pick up some of their food, some of their diet, and with our presence, so we know our presence is not an issue to them. We are not harassing them. So once we got that solid solid justification for us to be here, that we are not harassing them. We then embark on a new journey, I would say, and what we did was we applied for a permit, we applied for several different grants to get funding, to get a proper permission for us to conduct a long-term monitoring and research project of nesting behavior of rhinoceros hornbill. So that is just part of that hornbill project, the bigger project, where other than looking into nesting behavior of rhinoceros hornbill, we are also looking for other available nests in Merapu Forest Complex, and also we are studying the population density, population abundance of hornbill in and around Merapu Forest Complex. So in Merapu, we have 3 different land use. I wouldn't say land use. 3 different areas, 3 different geographic difference, which is Taman Negara, which is a very virgin rainforest protected by under the jurisdiction of Perhilitan, and then we have the CFS PL1 corridor, which consists of Hutan Simpang Kekal Permanent Forest Reserve, and this is consisted of Hutan Simpan Tanum, Hutan Simpan Sungayu, Hutan Simpan Persit, and some Ulu Jelai Forest Reserve, which has a mix of different protection status. Some of them is a production forest reserve where you can actually sustainably log them. Some of them is actually a source of our water supply, so they are quite protected. So, and in the corridor itself, in the CFS PL1 corridor, we have several state land as well. So state lands are under the jurisdiction of the state government, and locals can actually ask for them to grow their crops there. So they can just go to the government, ask with a proper permission, proper documentation, saying I want this area, I want to grow oil palm in this area. So they can actually convert it from a forest to a different land use. So different level of protection, different level of land use is actually very interesting for us to compare what is found in Taman Negara, how many species are found, is it very dense with hornbills compared to the forest reserve and compared to the state land. That is what we hypothesize. Taman Negara is more rich, but well, we never know, because for example in this area here, we actually have noticed out of the 9 species of hornbills that can be found in Merapu, we recorded 7 of them here. So this is a very small piece of land, mixture of everything. It's not a forest, entirely forest, but you still get 7 species, including the most endangered, the critically endangered helmeted hornbill, and also the endangered white crowned hornbill here. So, and also of course the rhinoceros hornbill nesting. So it is a nest, it's not just a place for them to forage, it's also a place for them as a refuge for them. So we want to study more on this. So this is what the hornbill project in MRS is all about. We want to study the nesting behavior, we want to know how many species are there in the Merapu Forest Complex. Okay, so like I said before, we have been here for the past 3 years, just monitoring, just being observant to what going around in this area. And only last year we pushed for funding, we pushed for permission to conduct research, because previously it wasn't a research, it was just a mere observation from a safe distance. So now luckily we already granted with a proper research permit, which enables us to do scientific documentation and also collecting samples. But we also luckily we also got some funding from the UNDP GEF ICCFS project, which enable us to recruit staffs as well as recruit locals, which is one of our main objective in MRS, which is to empower local, to capacity build local people. So with this grant, what we can do is actually we can hire local people to be involved directly in this project. They are known as hornbill steward, or in Malay pelindung unggang, and their role is actually to help us with studying the hornbill. So they are the one who are on the field and collecting data, what is the hornbills doing, what kind of foods are they bringing, how many times are they feeding every day, so all those kinds of data. And they will also be the one who goes into the forest, to Taman Negara especially, to census the hornbill population. So what we will do is we will have regular monitoring spots within the Taman Negara area, which we will do point count in the area. So for us, it's a good thing that we have more manpower, but the main objective of employing local is actually to capacity build them. So what they will achieve instead from this project is they will learn more about hornbills, and of course awareness level will increase on why is it important to conserve hornbill, what are the importance of hornbill in our ecosystem, and so on and so forth. But they will also gather new knowledge on the birds that are around them. So birds, as you know, Merapu is a very high touristic area due to the caves and also the mountains, which is the highest mountain in Peninsular Malaysia, Gunung Tahan. So Merapu is one of the access to Gunung Tahan, where people usually come here and go to hike to Gunung Tahan. But actually, what we can do more for the area, for Merapu, is we could also diversify the ecotourism product, which includes birding tourism, RV tourism. So we try to employ guides as well in our project, where they will learn more on birds, how to identify birds, where do we find birds, how to get a proper viewing of the bird, proper photo of the bird, where they can later share with their tourists. So later, this is a long process, it's not, Rome wasn't built in a day, so this is a very long procedure, but we need to start somewhere, and I hope this is where we start. And RV tourism is something that the Ministry of Tourism wanted to push since quite a while, and we hope with more people, guides especially, knows about birds here, they can provide a niche market for that, for RV tourism in Merapu. So in Merapu, we have tourists coming all over from Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, or even European and American, which comes here to observe pitas. But we could also provide them with other opportunity, observing hornbills, observing maybe a lot of things. There are a lot of animals here, especially birds. So that's the idea: training them, capacity build them as a local champion, but also they will gain knowledge which they can use for their job later. Alright. Okay, so that is about the grant. Okay, plan for this area. So the plan for this area, for this project, is to study hornbills and also to capacity build local as local champion and as a bird guide, a very niche market there. But also we want to provide the opportunity for tourists to observe hornbills and birds at a safe distance, but in a relatively I would say easier than anywhere else. So what we plan to do is we plan to build a structure, a hide, with the involvement of local orang asli. We wanted to build a traditional hide, a very comfortable area from a safe distance. I want to iterate it. It will always be from a safe distance, and with that, tourists can come watch hornbills from a safe distance, watch hornbills feeding the baby, which is I would say is a very rare thing. Maybe you could also witness hornbills coming out from the nest, fledging from the nest. So this is something very rare, and I would think a lot of people would pay for it. So the willingness to pay is high on this type of tourism, and this will help to elevate the local income. So bird guide would get their income, the owner of the land would get their income, the local orang asli from the cottage tourism would gain more income. So it is actually a compounding impact, a good impact towards the local economy. So that's what we plan to do. Again, it's a very long process, but we need to start somewhere, and I hope this is where we started. We hope this project can sustain for a very long time for us to achieve our greater objective, which is mainstreaming hornbill conservation globally in Peninsular Indonesia and specifically in Merapu. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat sejahtera. Pertama sekali saya nak ucapkan ribuan terima kasih kepada pihak penganjur, Majlis Perbandaran Taiping dan juga NES kerana telah menjemput perkhidmatan untuk sesi perkongsian ini. Selamat datang ke Taiping Bird Week 2021. Walaupun kita tak dapat hadir secara fizikal, tapi kita masih lagi dapat berkumpul secara maya. Masih boleh berkongsi pengalaman, berkongsi aktiviti dan juga berkongsi minat walaupun masing-masing berada di tempat yang berlainan. Okey, kita akan teruskan dengan slide. Okay, dalam slide ni kita akan berkongsi yang pertamanya latar belakang dan fungsi jabatan. Seterusnya program pelepasan burung upih dan akhir sekali kempen Selamatkan Harimau Melaya. Sejarah Jabatan Perkhidmatan bermula pada tahun 1932 apabila Suruhanjaya Hidupan Liar Melaya diwujudkan. Kemudiannya pada tahun 1972 Akta Perlindungan Hidupan Liar 1972 ataupun dikenali sebagai Akta 76 telah dikuatkuasakan. Pada waktu ni pentadbiran Jabatan Mergas Tua diambil alih oleh Kerajaan Persekutuan di bawah Ibu Pejabat Jabatan Perkhidmatan. Seterusnya Akta 76 telah digantikan dengan Akta 716 iaitu Akta Pemeliharaan Hidupan Liar pada tahun 2010. Dengan visi menerajui konservasi hidupan liar untuk kesejahteraan rakyat dan misinya iaitu komited dalam konservasi hidupan liar dan habitatnya untuk generasi akan datang, Jabatan Perkhidmatan telah menjalankan pelbagai aktiviti dan program bagi menyokong fungsi-fungsinya. Terdapat 8 fungsi di bawah Jabatan Perkhidmatan seperti yang kita boleh lihat dalam slide ni, dan pada kali ini saya akan kongsikan fungsi yang ketiga iaitu konservasi hidupan liar, iaitu melalui program pelepasan burung upih. Program ini merupakan kerjasama antara Jabatan Perkhidmatan dan Zoo Negara yang telah dijalankan bermula pada tahun 2007. Jadi pada 2007 kita bermula dengan 8 ekor burung. Burung-burung ini telah dibiakkan di Zoo Negara. Dari Zoo Negara kita bawa ke Kuala Gula untuk proses conditioning. Sebelum kita lepaskan, proses conditioning ni meliputi bagaimana burung ini akan habitatnya dan juga dietnya. Teman yang tak berapa familiar dengan tempat-tempat di Perak ni, Kuala Gula ni tak jauh daripada Taiping, lebih kurang 40 km. So telah dijalankan sepanjang tempoh ni dan kita merekodkan aktiviti pembiakan di Kuala Gula. Berdasarkan daripada pengalaman waktu kami menjalankan program ni, banyak perkara yang kita perlu beri perhatian. Yang pertama, bilangan burung yang kita akan lepaskan, jantina dia dan juga umur dia. Itu perlu diberi perhatian. Yang keduanya, program pelepasan yang dijalankan ni perlu dijalankan secara berterusan. Maksudnya bukan hanya sekali pelepasan. Dan untuk memastikan program pelepasan ini berjaya, kita perlu jalankan program-program yang lain bagi menyokong program yang utama ni. Contohnya program kesedaran dengan penduduk setempat. Ini untuk memastikan penduduk setempat sama-sama membantu program kita jalankan. Kita nak mereka sama-sama rasa bahawa burung upih ni milik mereka juga. Kita nak mereka sama-sama sayangkan burung upih ni. Yang ketiganya, program pelepasan spesies ni memerlukan kerjasama pelbagai pihak. Bukan sahaja agensi yang menjalankan program ni, tetapi juga kerjasama dari NGO, universiti untuk jalankan penyelidikan dan juga penduduk setempat. Sekiranya hanya satu pihak saja yang berusaha untuk memastikan program ini berjaya, mungkin burung ini agak sukar untuk kekal di habitatnya. Dari segi penyelidikan, jabatan juga telah bekerjasama dengan Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia dan Universiti Putra Malaysia dalam menjalankan kajian-kajian yang berkaitan. Penulisan-penulisan daripada program juga telah diterbitkan untuk rujukan bersama seperti yang ditunjukkan pada slide ni. Okey, seterusnya saya akan kongsikan video daripada program pelepasan burung upih di Kuala Gula.
Burung upih atau nama saintifiknya Dicteria schneeria merupakan sejenis burung air yang besar. Pada tahun 2004, anggaran populasi spesies ini adalah lebih kurang 5,600 ekor di seluruh dunia. Sebahagian besar spesies ini boleh didapati di seluruh Asia Tenggara, terutamanya Kamboja, Vietnam, Thailand, Semenanjung Malaysia dan Indonesia. Di Malaysia, ianya dikategorikan sebagai dilindungi sepenuhnya di bawah Akta Pemeliharaan Hidupan Liar 2010, Akta 716. Burung upih memerlukan habitat hutan bakau untuk hidup. Pengurangan populasi dan fragmentasi habitat yang berlaku pada masa kini menyebabkan populasi liar burung upih telah menjadi populasi yang terpencil di sesuatu kawasan. Kehilangan dan degradasi habitat burung upih merangkumi pengecilan saiz hutan bakau, penurunan kualiti habitat dan ketiadaan pokok-pokok bakau yang tinggi untuk pembinaan sarang. Di samping itu, gangguan manusia terhadap populasi, kawasan bersarang dan sumber makanannya juga merupakan punca utama lain pengurangan populasi burung upih ini. Selain itu, pencemaran minyak, pelepasan sisa perindustrian dan racun perosak daripada aktiviti pertanian ke habitat semula jadi populasi burung upih juga dilihat sebagai faktor penyumbang kepada pengurangan spesies ini. Antara kawasan yang masih menampung populasi liar burung upih sehingga kini ialah hutan paya Laut Mata yang terletak di negeri Perak dan juga beberapa kawasan di Kuala Selangor. Di hutan simpan paya Laut Mata, populasi burung upih ini dipantau dengan rapi oleh pihak Jabatan Penghiritan sejak akhir tahun 1980 lagi. Keputusan pemantauan tersebut menunjukkan populasi burung ini telah menurun dengan begitu ketara dalam jangka masa 20 tahun. Oleh itu, tindakan proaktif diambil bagi memastikan populasinya terus wujud di kawasan tersebut di samping menjadikannya sebagai sebuah kawasan tarikan pelancongan. Bagi tujuan pemeliharaan, sebuah pusat konservasi hidupan liar telah dibangunkan oleh Jabatan Perkhidmatan. Pemilihan Kuala Gula bagi program pemeliharaan burung upik adalah amat bersesuaian dengan statusnya sebagai santuari hidupan liar. Kawasan persekitarannya merupakan habitat yang amat sesuai bagi keperluan spesies ini. Beting lumpur di hutan bakau menyediakan sumber makanan yang banyak seperti ikan, cacing, siput dan ketam. Selain dari program pelepasan burung upik yang dijalankan di Pusat Konservasi Hidupan Liar Kuala Gula ini, beberapa program lain turut dilaksanakan seperti pancian burung, rondaan pemantauan, penguatkuasaan undang-undang serta membantu aktiviti-aktiviti penyelidikan. Bagi memastikan kewujudan burung upik di hutan simpan paya Laut Matang, program pelepasan semula burung upik telah dijalankan oleh Jabatan Perkhidmatan pada 7 Mac 2007. Program pelepasan burung upik merupakan kerjasama antara Jabatan Perkhidmatan dan Zoo Negara Malaysia. Kiranya telah dimulakan pada tahun 2007 dan diikuti dengan beberapa siri pelepasan pada tahun-tahun berikutnya. Kaedah pemantauan radiotelemetri digunakan untuk pemantauan selepas program pelepasan. Selain daripada kaedah radiotelemetri, pihak Jabatan Perkhidmatan juga telah menggunakan kaedah transmitter satelit dalam pemantauan burung upik yang telah dilepaskan. Burung-burung upik yang dilepaskan telah mula menunjukkan perkembangan dari segi pembiakan. Daripada tinjauan yang telah dijalankan oleh kakitangan perkhidmatan, burung-burung upik yang dilepaskan hanya membina sarang pada pokok perepat atau nama saintifiknya Sonaratia species. Program pelepasan burung upik ini diharap dapat meningkatkan populasi liar burung upik yang sedia ada di hutan simpan paya Laut Matang. Program ini juga akan menjadi tarikan baru kepada sektor ekopelancongan di Kuala Gula di samping usaha-usaha konservasi yang telah dan sedang dijalankan oleh Pusat Konservasi Burung Laut Kuala Gula. Burung upik mempunyai fungsi yang tersendiri dalam ekosistem hutan paya bakau. Melindungi burung upik juga bermakna melindungi sebahagian kestabilan ekosistem kita.
Itulah dia anak-anak kami di Kuala Gula. Okey, seterusnya pada kesempatan ini juga saya nak kongsikan sedikit berkenaan dengan kempen Selamatkan Harimau Melaya. Kempen ini dijalankan oleh Kementerian Tenaga dan Sumber Asli melalui Jabatan Perkhidmatan. Kempen ini telah dilancarkan pada tahun 2019 dan diteruskan sehingga tahun 2025. Kempen ini bertujuan untuk meningkatkan kesedaran awam berkenaan kepentingan pemeliharaan harimau Melaya yang semakin diancam kepupusan. Kempen ini merangkumi program konservasi dan penguatkuasaan, program kesedaran awam, publicity dan promosi serta program sumbangan dan corporate social responsibilities. Di bawah kempen ini, tabung Selamatkan Harimau Melaya telah diwujudkan sebagai medium kepada semua pihak yang berminat untuk bersama-sama menyumbang dan menggerakkan kempen ini. Untuk maklumat lanjut berkenaan dengan kempen ini, tuan-tuan dan puan-puan boleh layari Facebook, Twitter dan juga Instagram serta portal rasmi untuk kempen ini iaitu www.harimau.my. Hari kata saya berharap agar semua pihak dapat berganding bahu dalam menyelamatkan spesies hidupan liar dan juga habitatnya. Terima kasih sekali lagi kerana menjemput perkhidmatan. Sekian, terima kasih.
Okay, hari ini ada program untuk pelepasan 4 ekor burung matahari, 2 jantan dan 2 betina. Sekarang ni staf tengah menyiapkan sangkar dan kita akan menunggu sampai hari agak redup, mungkin dalam sejam lagi, dan kita akan mula pindahkan beruang tu ke dalam sangkar dan ke dalam lori dan terus tunggu hingga agak gelap lagi, dan pukul awal belapan tu kita akan bergerak ke Sungai Dekak, Hulu Terengganu. Akan dilepaskan 2 ekor yang pertama, kemudian akan bertolak ke Gawi tu pula untuk menaiki bot ke Sungai Cacing untuk pelepasan yang 2 ekor yang seterusnya ke Taman Negara Terengganu. Okay.
merupakan hari yang bersejarah lah bagi Jabatan Pelitan dengan kerjasama dengan FGB, Universiti Kebangsaan serta MNS. Jadi tim daripada NWRC, daripada Pelitan Terengganu serta tim daripada Kuala Lumpur, Ibu Pejabat Kuala Lumpur telah berjaya. Hari ini kalau kita tengok di belakang ni adalah merupakan 2 ekor beruang matahari yang telah kita simpan hampir 2 tahun. Jadi usaha Jabatan Pelitan ni adalah merupakan satu usaha untuk konservasi hidupan liar, di mana kita harapkan kedua pasangan ni boleh survive. Kenapa kita pilih kawasan Sungai Terengganu? Sebab ia adalah merupakan satu di bawah jagaan Jabatan Pelitan Taman Negara, dan kita akan pantau mengambil masa lebih kurang seminggu lah. Kita akan duduk di sini untuk mengelakkan daripada nak tahu keadaan buang ni boleh survive atau tidak boleh survive. Okey, jadi kita harap dengan program pelepasan ini dapat mengayakan lagi spesies di taman negara.
Pada hari ini, alhamdulillah kita telah berjaya menjalankan satu lagi program pelepasan hidupan liar yang melibatkan spesies rusa samba. Asalnya daripada Pusat Konservasi Hidupan Liar Sungai. Lokasi pelepasan adalah di kawasan Padang Ragut, Sungai Deka, di mana projek Padang Ragut ini pun merupakan projek jabatan yang kita tujuannya untuk memberi sumber makanan kepada hidupan liar di sini lah. Projek pelepasan rusa ini juga merupakan salah satu fungsi jabatan untuk meningkatkan lagi bilangan spesies hidupan liar di kawasan berhampiran di Taman Negara ini. Kita mengharapkan dengan adanya program pelepasan rusa samba ini, dia akan meningkatkan lagi bilangan populasi rusa samba yang menurut kajian yang lalu menunjukkan bahawa bilangan populasi rusa samba ini semakin berkurangan disebabkan faktor-faktor seperti pemburuan haram dan sebagainya. Dan dengan adanya program ini, kita dapat menambah populasi yang sedia ada dalam hutan, dan dengan adanya pelepasan jantan betina ini, pada kebiasaannya hidupan liar ini dia akan mendapat hidup bebas dan juga dapat membiak dengan jayanya.
Dah belum ni? Nak buka ni? Nanti tu. Dah kamu okey, aku nak buka pintu. Okey. Okey.